You know the wild man. Great balls of fire.
You shake my nerves and you rattle my brain. Too much love.
The piano-pounding showman who kicked over the bench. But you don't know this. He married his 13-year-old cousin and destroyed his career overnight. His 3-year-old son drowned in the family pool. His 19-year-old son died in a car crash. He shot at a bottle and hit his bass player twice in the chest on his own birthday. He showed up at Elvis's gates, drunk with a loaded gun. His 4th wife drowned days before their divorce was finalized. His 5th wife died after 77 days, covered in bruises and blood. The IRS seized everything he owned twice. A grand jury investigated him for murder. The dates, arrests, and court records are real. Where people argue is motive and what can't be proven. This is Jerry Lee Lewis's real story. Number 1. Married his 13-year-old cousin, destroyed his career in 7 days. On December 12, 1957, 22-year-old Jerry Lee Lewis married Myra Gale Brown in Hernando, Mississippi. She was 13 years old. She was his first cousin once removed, the daughter of his bass player, J.W. Brown. And Lewis was still married to his second wife. His divorce wouldn't be finalized for 6 more months. Nobody outside the family knew. Lewis kept it secret while his career exploded. Whole lot of shaking going on made him an international star. When Elvis was drafted in March 1958, Lewis was positioned to become the king of rock and roll. His British tour in May 1958 was supposed to make him a global star. Then, he brought Myra to London. On May 22, 1958, at Heathrow Airport, reporter Ray Berry noticed the young girl and asked who she was. Myra answered honestly, "I'm his wife." Berry asked her age. Myra tried to lie. "I'm 15. Berry took off running for a phone. Within hours, the British press discovered the truth. She was 13. She was his cousin. He was still married to someone else. The headlines exploded. Cradle robber. Baby snatcher. Within 3 days, the 37-date tour was canceled after only 3 shows. When he landed back in New York, American reporters were waiting. Radio stations stopped playing his records immediately. Concert promoters canceled shows. His fee dropped from $10,000 a night to $250. Lewis tried to defend himself. "I plumb married the girl, didn't I?" Nothing worked. His rock and roll career was finished at age 23. The marriage lasted 13 years. In 1970, Myra filed for divorce, citing every type of physical and mental abuse imaginable, from king-in-waiting to barroom act, in 7 days. Number 2. His 3-year-old son drowned in the family pool. On a day in 1962, Myra Lewis heard screaming outside their Memphis home. She ran to the backyard and found her son, Steve Allen Lewis, floating face down in the family swimming pool. He was 3 years old. Paramedics rushed him to the hospital, but he was already dead. Steve Allen Lewis was named after TV host Steve Allen, the man who gave Jerry Lee his first national exposure on The Steve Allen Show in July 1957. That performance made Lewis a star. Steve was born in February 1959, just months after the scandal destroyed his father's career. According to multiple accounts, Steve was Jerry Lee's favorite child. Jerry Lee was on the road when his son died. He'd been touring non-stop, taking any gig he could get for whatever money they'd pay. The $10,000 a night star was now playing bars for a few $100s, trying to support his family. When the call came, he was hundreds of miles from home. Myra later told friends that Jerry Lee blamed himself. He hadn't been there. He'd been chasing the career the scandal had destroyed. His son drowned in a pool bought with rock and roll money, and Jerry Lee hadn't been there to save him. The guilt consumed him. Steve Allen Lewis was buried in the family plot in Faraday, Louisiana, where Jerry Lee had grown up dirt poor. Years later, Lewis told People magazine, "The loss of my mother and 2 sons got to me. I was drinking heavy. I needed a 5th of tequila just to sober up. But in 1962, there was only 1 son dead." And here's what makes it darker. The second tragedy was 11 years away. And the pattern with water was just beginning. The drowning marked the beginning of Lewis's full collapse into addiction. The drinking became constant. The violence got worse. Myra said he beat her regularly after Steve's death. The man who lost his son to water would later lose 2 wives the same way, under circumstances that would leave investigators deeply suspicious. Number 3. His 19-year-old son died in a car crash 4 days after a TV appearance. On November 13, 1973, Jerry Lee Lewis Jr. appeared on NBC's The Midnight Special as a drummer. He was 19 years old, trying to follow his father into the music business. 4 days later, on November 17th, he was dead. Jerry Lee Jr. was Lewis's first son, born in 1954 to his second wife, Jane Mitchum. He grew up watching his father's career implode after the Myra scandal, then struggle through years of playing small venues. Junior, as everyone called him, was determined to make it in music on his own terms. He played drums and had real talent. His appearance on The Midnight Special should have been a breakthrough moment. On November 17, 1973, Jerry Lee Jr. was driving on Highway 79 near Hernando, Mississippi, not far from where his father had married Myra 16 years earlier. He was driving a Jeep. Accounts vary about what happened next, but the result was the same. The Jeep flipped. Jerry Lee Jr. was thrown from the vehicle and killed instantly. He was 19 years old. Jerry Lee Lewis had now buried both of his sons. Steve had drowned at age 3. Junior had died in a crash at 19. Lewis had 6 children across 7 marriages, but 2 of them were dead before age 20. And that's where the violence escalated. The double loss broke something fundamental in Lewis. Friends said he became even more reckless after Junior died, as if he'd stopped caring whether he lived or died himself. He drank more heavily. He used more pills. He drove drunk constantly. He waved guns around. He threatened people. The violence that had always simmered beneath his performances became unpredictable and dangerous. Within 3 years, he would shoot someone. Number 4. Shot at a Coke bottle, bullet hit his bass player twice. On September 29, 1976, Jerry Lee Lewis's 41st birthday, he shot at a Coke bottle with a .357 Magnum revolver. The bullet ricocheted and hit his bass player, Butch Owens, twice in the chest. Owens survived. Lewis was arrested. Lewis was at his Nesbitt, Mississippi ranch celebrating his birthday. He'd been drinking heavily. Butch Owens, his longtime bass player, was there. At some point during the evening, Lewis pulled out the .357 Magnum and started waving it around. Witnesses said Lewis was drunk and angry. Lewis pointed the gun at a Coke bottle sitting on a table and fired. The bullet went through the bottle and struck Owens in the chest. Whether Lewis fired a second shot or the bullet fragmented remains disputed, but Owens was hit twice. He collapsed and was rushed to the hospital with 2 gunshot wounds. Doctors said he was lucky to survive. The bullets missed vital organs by inches. Lewis was arrested and charged. His defense argued it was an accident. Lewis had been trying to shoot the bottle, and Owens was standing in the wrong place. The criminal case was eventually resolved, though Lewis faced a civil lawsuit from Owens. That case was settled out of court, but here's what makes it worse. Remarkably, Owens eventually played with Lewis again. The shooting established a pattern. Lewis with guns. Lewis violent when drunk. Lewis facing consequences and changing nothing. Less than 2 months later, Lewis would show up at Elvis Presley's house with another loaded gun. Number 5. Showed up at Graceland drunk with a gun at 3 in the morning. At 3 o'clock in the morning on November 23, 1976, less than 2 months after shooting his bass player, Jerry Lee Lewis crashed his Lincoln Continental into the gates of Graceland. He was drunk. He had a loaded Derringer pistol on the dashboard, and he was screaming for Elvis to come out. According to Lewis's biographer, Elvis had been trying to reach Jerry Lee by phone for weeks. On November 23rd, Elvis finally got through and told him to come out to the house. Later that night, Lewis was at a Memphis nightclub drinking champagne when someone gave him a gun. He climbed into his Lincoln, placed the loaded pistol on the dashboard, and drove to Graceland around 3 in the morning. Lewis smashed into the gates. Security guard Harold Lloyd watched as Lewis tried to throw a champagne bottle out the window. Not realizing it was rolled up, glass shattered everywhere. Lewis started yelling for Elvis. "Tell Elvis the killer's here. We're gonna find out who's really the king." Elvis, watching on closed-circuit TV, told security to call the police. Officers found Lewis still drunk, waving the pistol. He was arrested for carrying a pistol and public drunkenness. Lewis was genuinely hurt. Elvis told him, "Lock him up," Lewis said later. "That hurt my feelings. To be scared of me, knowing me the way he did, was ridiculous." This was Lewis's second arrest in less than 2 months. He'd shot someone in September. He'd been arrested at Elvis's house in November. His behavior was escalating. 6 years later, his fourth wife would drown under suspicious circumstances. 7 years after that, his fifth wife would die under circumstances even more disturbing. Number 6. His fourth wife drowned days before divorce. Authorities ruled it accidental. On June 8, 1982, Jaron Elizabeth Gunn Pate drowned in a swimming pool at a friend's house in Tennessee. She was 38 years old. Her divorce from Jerry Lee Lewis was days away from being finalized. The settlement, according to multiple sources, would have been substantial. Instead, she died. The death was ruled accidental by authorities. Lewis had married Jaron in October 1971, shortly after his divorce from Myra. Jaron was already pregnant when they married. The marriage was volatile from the start. They separated and reconciled multiple times. They sued each other for divorce, then got back together, then sued again. In a 1979 divorce filing, Jaron accused Lewis of cruel and inhuman treatment, adultery, habitual drunkenness, and habitual use of narcotic drugs. During one documented argument, Lewis allegedly told Jaron, "Don't worry about support. You're not going to be around very long anyway. And if you don't get off my back and leave me alone, you will end up at the bottom of the lake with chains on you." The divorce case was pending when Jaron drowned. She was at a friend's house, not at Lewis's property. No one witnessed the drowning. She was found in the pool, already dead. Medical examiners ruled the death accidental. Lewis's road manager, J.W. Witten, later said, "He always said crazy stuff like that. There was nothing to it." The timing raised questions among critics and journalists. Days before a major settlement, Lewis's wife drowned. No witnesses, no criminal investigation followed. Lewis married his fifth wife, Shawn Michelle Stevens, almost exactly 1 year later, in June 1983. Except the timeline doesn't end there. That marriage would last 77 days before Stevens was found dead in Lewis's house. 2 wives, both dead. Both at moments that changed Lewis's financial situation. No criminal charges were ever filed. Number 7. His fifth wife died after 77 days. Grand jury heard conflicting accounts. On August 24, 1983, Lottie Jackson, the housekeeper at Jerry Lee Lewis's Mississippi mansion, walked into a guest bedroom to wake Shawn Michelle Stevens Lewis. Shawn didn't respond. Her body was cold. She was covered in bruises. There was blood on her body and blood on the sheets. Witnesses reported seeing claw marks on Jerry Lee Lewis's hands. Shawn Michelle Stevens had been married to Jerry Lee Lewis for exactly 77 days. Shawn was 25 years old, a former cocktail waitress from Michigan who met Lewis at a Detroit hotel in 1981. They married on June 7, 1983. The wedding was covered by the National Enquirer. From the wedding day, there was trouble. Shawn's family arrived at 11 in the morning the day after the wedding. They sat outside locked doors for over an hour before Shawn could let them in. Jerry Lee didn't emerge for another hour. When he appeared, he was buzzed, mumbling, in a bad mood. He started screaming at Shawn's family. 77 days later, Sean was dead. The first paramedic, Sonny Daniels, found her body in the guest bedroom, not the master bedroom where Lewis slept, at noon. The room was spotless. Nothing on the tables, no clothes, no dust. Just Sean's cold body on the bed, covers pulled to her neck. When paramedics pulled back the covers, they documented the bruises and blood. Jerry Lee Lewis was in his bedroom behind a door with iron bars when paramedics arrived. The autopsy determined Sean died from pulmonary edema caused by a methadone overdose. The official cause of death was ruled an overdose, but questions emerged. Sean wasn't known to use methadone. The bruises and blood suggested possible violence. The reported claw marks on Lewis's hands suggested a possible struggle. Sean's sister later stated that Lewis called her that evening and said, "Your sister's dead, and she was a bad girl." A Rolling Stone journalist investigated and published allegations suggesting Lewis may have been responsible. Lewis was called before a grand jury to answer questions about the bruises, the blood, and the circumstances. Lewis testified it was an accident. The grand jury found insufficient evidence to indict him. Lewis was cleared of criminal charges. But here's where the paper trail gets dark. Sean's mother never accepted the official explanation. 2 wives dead in swimming pools. A third wife dead covered in bruises with conflicting explanations. No criminal convictions resulted from any of the deaths. Critics and journalists documented the pattern, but no charges were ever filed. Number 8. The IRS seized everything twice. Bankruptcy $3 million. In 1979, IRS agents showed up at Jerry Lee Lewis's Mississippi ranch with a court order. They seized over 60 items: cars, motorcycles, tractors, jewelry, instruments, firearms, his Rolls Royce. Everything was auctioned in 1980. Total raised $91,000. It barely touched what Lewis owed. Lewis had made millions but wanted cash. He didn't trust banks. When the IRS came calling, Lewis didn't have it. In 1984, Lewis was charged with tax evasion. The jury acquitted him, but the IRS didn't care. He still owed them money. In 1985, they came back. More property seized. Lewis reportedly threatened to blow the heads off any IRS agents who tried again. By 1988, Lewis filed for bankruptcy, listing over $3 million in debts. $2 million to the IRS, $950,000 to the Whiskey River Club. Tens of thousands more to various creditors. Lewis moved to Ireland in 1993, widely suspected as IRS avoidance. He returned in 1997. By his death in 2022, his net worth was $10 to $15 million. He'd clawed back, but the IRS had taken years of his life. Number 9. His career went from stadiums to dive bars in 1 week. The financial devastation was immediate. Lewis went from earning $10,000 per show playing stadiums to $250 playing bars. He took any gig he could get: VFW halls, roadhouses, dive bars. He had a wife, a baby, a house, and expenses. Suddenly, almost no income. Except here's the scale of what he lost. Dick Clark banned him from American Bandstand. Ed Sullivan banned him. Radio stations yanked his records mid-rotation. 26 cities canceled tour dates in a single week. The man positioned to replace Elvis as the king of rock and roll was suddenly unemployable. It took nearly a decade to rebuild, and he never did it in rock and roll. He reinvented himself as a country artist in 1968 with Another Place, Another Time. Throughout the 1970s, Lewis topped country charts regularly. But he never forgot what the scandal cost him. From king in waiting to barroom act because a 13-year-old told the truth at an airport. Number 10. Nearly died from a stomach tear caused by decades of addiction. In November 1981, Jerry Lee Lewis was rushed to Methodist Hospital in Memphis. He was bleeding internally from a 2-inch tear in his stomach lining. Doctors gave him a 50-50 chance of survival. The tear was caused by decades of consuming massive quantities of alcohol, amphetamines, and barbiturates. At 46, his body was shutting down. He'd been drinking heavily since his teenage years. After Steve's drowning in 1962, the drinking became constant. After Junior's death in 1973, he added heavy amphetamine use. By the early 1980s, Lewis was consuming a fifth of tequila daily just to sober up. Amphetamines to wake up, barbiturates to sleep, alcohol all day, prescription painkillers on top. The stomach tear nearly killed him. Doctors performed emergency surgery, weeks in intensive care, 2 major operations, 2 months hospitalized. He left in January 1982, weak but alive. Doctors told him to stop drinking immediately or he'd die. Lewis left the hospital and went right back to drinking. Within months, he was using heavily again. 6 months after nearly dying, his 4th wife Jaren drowned. 13 months after nearly dying, his 5th wife Shawn died in his house. The day her body was discovered, Lewis called a local bar asking for hypodermic needles. In 1986, Lewis checked himself into the Betty Ford Center. He was 51 and had been addicted for more than 20 years. He drank in moderation afterward, always one step from another crisis. Lewis died October 28, 2022, at age 87. He outlived Elvis by 45 years. He survived shootings, car crashes, overdoses, IRS seizures, bankruptcy, and a stomach injury that should have killed him. 70 years of piano, 22 when he became a legend, 23 when he destroyed it. 6 decades rebuilding while leaving a trail of death. Great Balls of Fire sold millions. Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, Country Music Hall of Fame, changed music forever. Every piano player after him learned from him. But the documented pattern is darker. Married his 13-year-old cousin, 2 sons dead before 20. Shot at a bottle, hit his bass player. 4th wife drowned before divorce, ruled accidental. 5th wife dead after 77 days. Bruises documented, grand jury testimony conflicting. Allegations published, investigations conducted, no criminal charges filed. IRS seized everything, twice. $10,000 a night to $250 in 7 days. The legend says Jerry Lee was the wild man, the killer, the piano pounder. The documented timeline shows a man who married a child, buried 2 sons, faced a grand jury over his 5th wife's death, and outlived nearly everyone who witnessed it. Rolling Stone ranked him among the greatest. The 3-year-old who drowned didn't live to see it. The 19-year-old killed in a crash didn't. The 4th wife didn't. The 5th wife didn't. He lived to 87, outlived everyone who said he'd destroy himself. The music survived, the recording survived, and the questions, 2 drowned wives, 1 dead with bruises, remain officially answered only by insufficient evidence and no charges filed. Which moment shocked you most? The 13-year-old bride? 2 wives drowned, 77 days ending in bruises and blood? Bass player shot on Jerry Lee's birthday? Comment below. And if you want the full story of what the grand jury heard about Shawn Stevens, the testimony even his defenders can't explain, subscribe. That's next.